I knew something was wrong when my manager called my 42-page vendor agreement cute. Then he deleted 6 legal safeguards in a single meeting and told me to trust the process. 2 months later, we were sued for $25 million. And I had receipts, clean, time-stamped, and fatal. They thought contracts were just paper. I was about to show them they were armor, and I'd been quietly collecting every piece of evidence while they laughed at my paranoia. The best revenge isn't loud. It's a perfectly documented paper trail that speaks for itself in court. My name is Elena Rowe, and I've been the Contracts and Risk Manager at Byron Edge Technologies for 3 years. Before Seattle's rain and tech scene swallowed me whole, I spent 5 years in Dallas working supply chain risk for a logistics giant that moved everything from medical supplies to military equipment. That job taught me one fundamental truth. Trust is worthless compared to a single line in a contract. I learned that lesson the hard way when a trusted partner cost us $8 million because someone forgot to include a force majeure clause. I watched good people lose their jobs while the partner walked away clean. Never again. Byron Edge manufactures precision robotic components for surgical systems. We're not saving lives directly. But when our parts fail, surgeons' hands shake, and that's when people die. I take that responsibility seriously. Maybe too seriously. According to the new blood flooding our C-suite, enter Matt Dwyer, Harvard Law, Stanford MBA, and a resume decorated with 3 successful startups that no one had heard of. He swept into our legal department like he was about to disrupt the entire concept of contracts. 34 years old, perfectly coiffed hair, and a vocabulary that was 40% legal terms and 60% Silicon Valley buzzwords. Our first meeting was on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just finished reviewing a 42-page vendor agreement with Velmar Components, our primary supplier for servo motors. I'd spent 2 weeks crafting it, each clause a small fortress against the chaos of supply chain failures. "This is adorable," Matt said, flipping through my work like it was a restaurant menu. "But we need to be more agile. This reads like something from 1995. I watched him pull out a red pen, not metaphorically, an actual red Mont Blanc that probably cost more than my car payment. Indemnification clause? Too aggressive. / liquidated damages. We're partners, not adversaries. / arbitration requirements. That's what good faith is for. / force majeure. Come on, this is Seattle, not a war zone. / right to audit. That's borderline offensive to a trusted vendor. / termination for convenience. We're building relationships here. / 6 critical protections, gone in under 3 minutes. "Matt," I said, keeping my voice steady, "these clauses exist because lawyers love to bill hours." He laughed, that specific laugh that only comes from people who've never been personally liable for anything. "Elena, I get it. You're old school. But modern contracting is about collaboration, not confrontation." Old school. I was 38. I didn't argue. I'd learned that when a man with an Ivy League degree calls your work cute, defending it only gets you labeled as difficult or not a team player. Instead, I did what I always do. I documented everything. Screenshot of the original contract. Screenshot of his revisions. Recording of the meeting, legal in Washington state with single-party consent. Email to myself with the subject line, Velmar Original Terms, Archive Copy. Everything backed up to my personal drive, encrypted, time-stamped. "Send the revised version to Velmar by end of day," Matt instructed, already checking his phone. "And Elena? Try to embrace the change. We're not in the business of worst-case scenarios." I nodded, smiled, even. "Of course, I'll send it right away." He left my office trailing cologne and confidence. I sat there, staring at the mutilated contract, and made a decision. I would follow orders. I would send his version, but I would also prepare for the storm I could see building on the horizon. That afternoon, I created a folder on my personal drive. Vendor backup, full V2, do not delete. Inside went everything. The original contract, the recorded meeting, email chains, Matt's written instructions to streamline our legal protections. His PowerPoint about agile contracting in the modern era. Even his LinkedIn posts about disrupting traditional business paradigms. My colleagues thought I was paranoid, the younger ones especially. Fresh from schools where lean startup methodology was gospel. They drank their kombucha and talked about building trust networks, while I quietly archived every interaction, every decision, every moment where someone chose ego over evidence. 3 weeks later, Matt was promoted to Chief Legal Officer. His first all-hands email used the word synergy 14 times. I knew then that this would end badly. I just didn't know it would end with $25 million in damages and Matt's career in flames. But I was ready. Because while everyone else was embracing the future, I was protecting us from it. The red pen incident, as I came to call it, was just the beginning. Matt's agile contracting revolution spread through Byron Edge like a virus dressed in TED Talk quotes. Within a month, he'd assembled a team of believers, mostly kids under 30, who treated his every word like scripture. They held contract innovation sessions in our glass-walled conference rooms, where legal precedent was treated like some antiquated religion we needed to abandon. Contracts should be living documents. Matt preached during one particularly painful Thursday meeting. They should breathe with the relationship, not suffocate it. I sat in the back, taking notes that looked professional but were actually documentation for my growing archive. Living documents, I wrote, aka documents that can die when convenient. The culture shift was immediate and nauseating. Our legal department transformed from a place of careful deliberation to a playground of radical transparency and trust-based partnerships. Matt had us all reading books about conscious capitalism and the gift economy. He actually said, in front of 40 people, that jurisdiction clauses were geographic discrimination. The younger staff ate it up. They started having vulnerability circles where they shared their legal fears and worked to release them. I watched a junior lawyer literally burn a printed arbitration clause in the parking lot as part of what she called letting go of litigation mindset. Meanwhile, I remained the ghost in the machine, silently documenting this descent into contractual madness. Elena, Matt cornered me after one meeting. I notice you haven't contributed to our innovation Slack channel. I prefer email, I said. Better documentation trail. He laughed. See? That's exactly the mindset we need to evolve past. Documentation trail? We're not building a case. We're building relationships. Of course, I replied, making a mental note to screenshot his Slack message about how email was fear-based communication. The Velmar contract became our flagship example of New Age contracting. Matt presented it at industry conferences, calling it a paradigm shift in vendor relations. He actually won an award from some startup incubator for Most Innovative Legal Framework. I watched him give a keynote about it, standing on stage in his $3,000 sneakers, explaining how removing adversarial language had unlocked unprecedented collaboration. We replaced penalties with trust, he said to thunderous applause. We replaced enforcement with engagement. What he didn't mention was that Velmar's lawyers had been laughing for weeks. I knew because I'd maintained relationships with their legal team from the old days. Your new boy wonder just gave us Christmas in July. Their senior counsel had told me off the record. No penalties, no audit rights, no termination clause. We could deliver cardboard boxes and you'd have to pay full price. I'm aware, I'd replied. Why didn't you stop it? I tried. I was overruled. I'm just documenting. There was a pause. Smart woman. The most infuriating part was watching Matt gaslight anyone who questioned him. When our CFO asked about financial protections, Matt responded with a 20-minute dissertation on abundance mindset versus scarcity thinking. When procurement raised concerns about delivery guarantees, he assigned them a book about radical acceptance in business. I started calling it the cult of contractual stupidity in my private notes. Every week brought new innovations in legal malpractice. Matt eliminated warranty requirements because they implied distrust. He removed inspection rights because they were micromanagement. He actually tried to replace the entire force majeure section with a single line about navigating challenges together with compassion. "Elena, you're awfully quiet," he said during one particularly absurd meeting where he suggested replacing specific delivery dates with mutual understanding of urgency. "Just learning," I said, which wasn't a lie. I was learning exactly how to document gross negligence. The breaking point came when he sent me his masterpiece, a 2-page memorandum of trust, to replace our standard 30-page manufacturing agreement. "This is the future," he explained, eyes shining with evangelical fervor. "Why do we need 30 pages when we can simply agree to act in good faith and communicate openly? What about specifications, quality standards, remedies for breach? Those are fear-based concepts. We're moving beyond fear." I wanted to scream that fear was sometimes called prudent risk management, but instead, I smiled and filed his memo in my ever-growing folder of evidence. The young lawyers started calling traditional contracts trust barriers. They had a Slack emoji of a broken chain they'd use whenever they liberated a relationship from oppressive legalese. I kept my head down, did my job, and watched the timer tick down to inevitable disaster. Because here's what Matt and his disciples didn't understand. The business world isn't a yoga retreat. It's a boxing ring where your contract is your gloves. And he'd just convinced everyone to fight bare-knuckled against opponents wearing brass knuckles. The Monday it all went to hell. Matt was in San Francisco, giving another talk about contracts as love languages. I was in my office, staring at an email from Velmar that simply said, "Delivery delayed indefinitely. No penalties apply as per amended contract. Please acknowledge receipt." The subject line of my response was, "Acknowledged." The subject line of my email to myself was, "Day 0. Begin documentation of damages." The calm lasted exactly 6 weeks after the new contracts went live. During those 6 weeks, Byron Edge floated in a bubble of artificial harmony. Matt's trust-based approach was hailed as revolutionary. Harvard Business Review ran a puff piece titled, "The Company That Killed Contracts." Our stock price actually went up 3 points based on innovative leadership. I spent those 6 weeks building my shadow archive with the dedication of a doomsday prepper. Every morning, I'd arrive at 6 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else. I'd review every vendor communication, every delivery report, every quality metric. Anything that looked remotely concerning got copied, encrypted, and stored in my personal fortress of documentation. Vendor backup, full V2, do not delete, grew into subfolders. Original contracts archived. Revision, history, complete. Meeting recordings, authenticated. Email, chains, unedited. Financial impact projections. I even created a folder called Matt Public Statements, where I saved every interview, blog post, and conference video where he bragged about dismantling our legal protections. My colleagues, meanwhile, were drunk on Kool-Aid and kombucha. The lunch conversations were surreal. "Isn't it amazing how much faster everything moves without all that legal friction?" someone would say. And everyone would nod like they'd discovered fire. "Elena, you're so quiet lately," observed Jessica, one of Matt's true believers. "You should join our morning meditation circle. We're manifesting successful partnerships." "I prefer to manifest them through enforceable contracts," I almost said. Instead, "Thanks, I'll think about it." The facilities team installed a trust wall in the lobby, a digital display showing real-time testimonials from vendors about how much they loved working with us now. Matt had his assistant update it daily with quotes like, "Byron Edge treats us like family, not suppliers." Family. Right. Charles Manson had a family too. I started noticing the cracks in week 4. Delivery times started stretching. Minor delays, vendors would say, knowing we had no recourse. Quality control reports showed increasing defect rates. But without audit rights, we couldn't investigate. Invoice amounts began creeping up with vague justifications like market adjustments that we couldn't challenge without penalty clauses. I documented everything: screenshots, spreadsheets, trend analyses. I built PowerPoints no one asked for, showing the degradation in vendor performance. I saved them all with innocuous names like Q3 Review Draft and Vendor Performance Notes. Matt, flying high on his own supply, dismissed every concern. These are just adjustment periods, he'd say. Change is always uncomfortable at first. Week 5 brought the first serious warning sign. Velmar missed a critical delivery of servo motors, components we needed for a major hospital system order. Their response to our inquiry was a masterclass in malicious compliance. Per our agreement section 2.1, we commit to working together in good faith. Current supply chain challenges require us to prioritize. We are acting in good faith by communicating this to you. No specific delivery date was contractually mandated. I forwarded it to Matt with a simple FYI. His response: let's hop on a call with them. I'm sure we can work this out with open dialogue. The call was a humiliation. Velmar's legal team, the same one that had been laughing at us for weeks, played Matt like a violin. They used his own language against him: partnership, mutual understanding, flexible collaboration. Every buzzword he'd championed became a weapon in their hands. "We're disappointed you're taking such an adversarial tone," their lawyer actually said when Matt tried to push for a delivery date. "We thought Byron Edge believed in trust-based relationships." Matt left that call looking pale. But not pale enough to admit error. "They're just testing boundaries," he told the leadership team. "We need to show them we're committed to this new paradigm." I watched our CFO's eye twitch. Our production manager stared at the table. The head of sales looked like she was calculating her resume value. But no one said anything, because Matt had the CEO's ear. And the CEO had drunk deeply from the fountain of disruption. That weekend, I spent 12 hours creating what I called the Inevitability Report. A comprehensive analysis showing exactly how each removed contract protection would likely be exploited, with financial projections for each scenario. I saved it in 3 places, date-stamped it, and had it notarized. Yes, notarized. By a friend who was a notary and understood the value of authenticated documents. Sunday night. I sat in my home office, staring at my archive. 63 gigabytes of evidence. Every decision, every revision, every moment where bravado replaced prudence. I opened a bottle of wine, a good one, a 2015 Barolo I'd been saving, and toasted my computer screen. To the spectacular catastrophe about to unfold, I said to no one. And to the beautiful, brutal efficiency of documented truth. Monday morning arrived with unusual Seattle sunshine. I walked into the office at my usual 6 a.m. and found an email sent at 2:47 a.m. from Velmar's president. Subject: Force majeure event. Delivery suspension. The body was brief. Due to circumstances beyond our control, all deliveries are suspended indefinitely. As per our current agreement, no penalties or liabilities apply. We look forward to resolving this matter through good faith discussions. I looked at the empty office, the trust wall glowing with yesterday's vendor love letters, the meditation cushions in the corner conference room. Then I forwarded the email to all leadership with a 2-word addition. It begins. Monday morning exploded like a grenade in slow motion. By 7 a.m., the Slack channels were on fire. Production discovered we had exactly 4 days of servo motor inventory. Sales calculated we'd miss 3 major hospital system deadlines. Finance projected $2.8 million in immediate losses, with more hemorrhaging daily. Matt arrived at 9:15 a.m., still glowing from his San Francisco talk, completely oblivious to the carnage unfolding in his wake. The emergency meeting was called for 10 a.m. I arrived 5 minutes early with a legal pad, appearing concerned but not vindicated. Never appear vindicated when the ship you warned about icebergs finally hits one. This is a temporary setback. Matt opened, his confidence wavering, but not broken. Velmar is a trusted partner. They're not doing this maliciously. They've suspended all deliveries indefinitely, our CFO said, his voice dangerously quiet. Our entire Q4 production schedule is at risk. Then we talk to them. We remind them of our relationship. What leverage do we have? The question came from our CEO, David Park. who'd finally emerged from his executive bubble. What happens if they don't deliver? Matt's silence was deafening. Elena. David turned to me. You handled the original Velmar contract. What were our protections? I flipped through my legal pad, though I knew every word by heart. The original contract included liquidated damages of $50,000 per day for delivery delays, mandatory arbitration within 72 hours of dispute, right to source from alternative suppliers at Velmar's expense if delays exceeded 5 days, automatic termination rights for breach of delivery schedules. And the current contract? I met Matt's eyes. The current contract emphasizes good faith and open communication. The room went silent. Someone's coffee cup clicked against the conference table like a gavel. We need to call legal, someone suggested. I am legal, Matt snapped, his composure finally cracking. And this is just negotiation tactics. They're bluffing. By noon, it was clear they weren't bluffing. Our production line shut down at 2:30 p.m. The floor manager sent a photo to the leadership Slack. 47 workers standing idle beside silent machines. The caption read, Trust-based manufacturing in action. Matt called Velmar 6 times. They didn't answer until the 6th call, and then only to say their legal team would review the situation and respond in due course, as per our agreement's emphasis on thoughtful communication. Tuesday brought reporters. Someone, definitely not me, though I had my suspicions about the CFO, had leaked the story. Medtech company faces production crisis after revolutionary contract strategy backfires, ran in the Seattle Times. Matt tried damage control, sending out a company-wide email about temporary supply chain adjustments and the strength of our vendor relationships. He actually used the phrase, growing pains of innovation. Wednesday. Velmar responded, via their lawyers. They wanted $25 million. The logic was breathtaking in its audacity. They claimed we had damaged their relationship with their suppliers by requesting rapid delivery changes without contractual backing. They cited Matt's own public statements about partnership equity and argued we had violated the spirit of our trust-based agreement by making demands that implied distrust. They actually quoted his Harvard Business Review interview. At Byron Edge, we believe vendors are equal partners deserving of respect, not subordinates to be penalized. This is insane, Matt said, holding the letter like it might explode. They can't sue us for trusting them. Our outside counsel, hired that morning because Matt finally admitted he was in over his head, reviewed the situation with the expression of an oncologist delivering terminal diagnosis. They can, and they are. Your contract has no arbitration clause, so this goes to court. No limitation of liability, so they can claim any amount. No jurisdiction clause, so they filed in Delaware where their headquarters are and where judges love complex corporate litigation. And Mr. Dwyer, your public statements about treating vendors as equals could be construed as creating fiduciary duties you never intended. Matt's face went from red to white to green, a full Christmas spectrum of panic. What about the force majeure claim? David asked. What force majeure clause? The outside counsel responded, I'm looking at this contract, and I see 2 pages of what I can only describe as corporate poetry. Navigate challenges with compassion? That's not a legal term. That's a greeting card. Thursday's all-hands meeting was a massacre. David didn't fire Matt, not yet. But he used phrases like comprehensive review and restructuring of priorities. Matt sat silently, his red Mont Blanc nowhere to be seen. Elena, David said as the meeting ended, I need you to pull everything, every version of every contract, every communication, every decision point that got us here. I'll need a few hours to compile it all. I lied. I had it ready in 15 minutes. 63 gigabytes. Organized chronologically, indexed, and searchable. I just needed to make it look like I hadn't been preparing for this exact moment for 2 months. That evening, as the office emptied and the trust wall flickered with yesterday's obsolete optimism, I found Matt sitting alone in his office, staring at his laptop. You knew, he said without looking up. You knew this would happen. I could have been kind, could have offered platitudes about hindsight or learning experiences. Instead, I told the truth. Yes. Why didn't you stop me? I tried. You called it fear-based thinking. You had me removed from the contract review committee, remember? Because I wasn't aligned with the new paradigm. He finally looked at me, and for the first time, I saw Matt Dwyer without the armor of his ego. They're going to destroy me in deposition, aren't they? I thought about the recordings I had, his voice dismissing over-engineered protections, his laughter at paranoid risk management, his TED Talk about contracts as barriers to human connection. Yes, I said, they are. Friday morning, we were served $25 million, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages for breach of implied covenant of good faith. The lawsuit was a masterpiece of legal jujitsu, using every one of Matt's innovations against us. The lack of specificity became evidence of bad faith. The absence of penalties became proof of our acknowledgement of their sovereignty. The missing arbitration clause meant a full jury trial, and I hadn't even been deposed yet. The legal spiral began with discovery requests that read like a corporate colonoscopy. Velmar's legal team wanted everything: emails, Slack messages, meeting notes, voicemails, probably our coffee orders if they thought it would help. They had 7 lawyers on the case. We had Matt and 2 outside counsel who looked physically pained every time they read our trust-based contract. We need to find something, anything, that shows they acted in bad faith. Matt said during our first strategy meeting, he'd lost weight, his designer stubble now looking less intentional and more abandoned. Our outside counsel, a silver-haired veteran named Richard Torres, didn't even look up from his notes. Mr. Dwyer, they're suing us using your own philosophy. Every document where you champion trust over protection is evidence for their case. We're not looking for their bad faith. We're trying to minimize the appearance of our incompetence. The word hung in the air. Incompetence. David Park had stopped attending these meetings after the second one, where Richard had used the phrase legal malpractice 3 times in 5 minutes. The interrogatories arrived like a swarm of locusts, each question designed to humiliate. Please describe all protections removed from standard vendor contracts and provide business justification for each removal. List all instances where Byron Edge requested vendor compliance without contractual backing. Provide all public statements regarding the equivalency of vendor partnerships. Matt tried to craft responses that sounded reasonable. I watched him type and delete, sweat beading on his forehead despite the aggressive air conditioning. Elena, you were in those early meetings. Back me up here. We had solid business reasons, right? I looked at him steadily. I have all my notes from those meetings. I'll provide whatever documentation is requested. He heard what I didn't say. The deposition notice came 3 weeks later. They wanted me first, before Matt. Strategic. Really? Get the person with the evidence before the person who needed to explain it. You'll be fine, Matt assured me, with the false confidence of someone trying to convince himself. Just stick to the facts. Don't offer opinions. I always stick to the facts, I replied. The night before my deposition, I reviewed my archive one last time. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence I'd so carefully preserved, I'd already provided it all in discovery. Of course, legal privilege didn't apply when I'd been explicitly documenting business decisions, not seeking legal advice. I dressed carefully that morning. Conservative navy suit, minimal jewelry, the appearance of someone who took their oath seriously, which I did. Velmar's lead attorney was a woman named Patricia Chen Williams, and she was everything Matt pretended to be. Actually brilliant, genuinely innovative, and absolutely ruthless. Ms. Rowe, she began after the preliminaries, how long have you been in contract management? 15 years. And in your experience, what is the purpose of a liquidated damages clause? To establish predetermined compensation for specific breaches, avoiding the need to prove actual damages. Was such a clause present in the original Velmar contract you drafted? Yes. Please describe it. I did, in detail. And was this clause present in the final executed contract? No. Who removed it? Matt Dwyer. She pulled out a transcript. I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 7. Can you identify this? It was my recording transcript, the one where Matt called my protections over-engineered crap. This is a transcript of the March 15th contract review meeting. Is this accurate? Yes. She smiled slightly. Please read Mr. Dwyer's comment highlighted on page 3. I read Matt's words aloud. Penalties are for people who expect failure. We're building for success. Did you respond? Yes. I said that penalties were for people who understand that success requires accountability. What was Mr. Dwyer's response? He said I was stuck in a scarcity mindset and removed me from the contract review committee. For 4 hours, she walked me through every protection, every removal, every warning I'd given. She had me read Matt's emails dismissing my concerns. She had me confirm his public statements about liberation from legal bondage. Ms. Rowe, did you believe removing these protections was prudent? Our counsel objected, sustained. Ms. Rowe, did you document your concerns? Yes. Why? Because I believed the company would need a record of the decision-making process. You anticipated problems. I anticipated that operating without contractual protections in a complex supply chain carried significant risks. She pulled out another document. Exhibit 24. Can you identify this? It was my inevitability report, the one I'd created and notarized. When did you create this? 6 weeks after the new contracts were implemented. Before any delivery issues? Yes. Please read your projection for Velmar's potential actions on page 12. I read my own words. Without penalty clauses, Velmar has no incentive to prioritize our deliveries during supply constraints. They will likely service contracts with financial consequences first, leaving Byron Edge vulnerable to indefinite delays. Were you correct? Yes. Matt was visibly sweating from across the room. Our lawyers were taking notes so furiously I thought their pens might catch fire. One final question. Ms. Rowe, do you have any additional documentation relevant to this case? I looked at Matt, then at Patricia. I have maintained comprehensive records of all contract-related decisions, meetings, and communications. All of them. All of them. She smiled like a shark who'd just spotted a seal. No further questions at this time. We reserve the right to recall this witness. During the break, Matt cornered me in the hallway. You buried me, he whispered, his voice cracking. No, I replied calmly. You buried yourself. I just kept very good notes. His deposition was scheduled for the next day. I heard later that it lasted 7 hours and included 2 bathroom breaks where he vomited. They played his TED Talk. They quoted his Harvard Business Review interview. They had him explain, word by word, why he'd removed every protection I'd built. And for each explanation, they had my documentation showing I'd warned against it. By the time they were done, Matt Dwyer wasn't just exposed as incompetent. He was the poster child for corporate hubris, the cautionary tale that would be taught in law schools for decades. The settlement negotiations began the following week. The deposition room felt smaller the second time. They'd recalled me after Matt's catastrophic 7-hour testimony. Patricia Chen Williams looked refreshed, almost cheerful. Our legal team looked like they'd aged 5 years in a week. Ms. Rowe, we've reviewed Mr. Dwyer's deposition transcript. He claims you never formally objected to the contract changes. Is this accurate? I pulled out my phone, connected it to the presentation system. May I? The judge nodded. I played the recording. Matt's voice filled the room. Elena, your objections are noted and ignored. This isn't a democracy. I'm the chief legal officer, and we're doing this my way. I believe that constitutes a formal objection, I said. Patricia barely suppressed a smile. Mr. Dwyer also testified that no one could have predicted Velmar's actions. Do you agree? No. Why not? I opened my folder. Because I predicted it, in writing, notarized, 6 weeks before it happened. She had me walk through every prediction in my inevitability report. Each one had come true with almost prophetic accuracy. Velmar's lawyers were taking notes, probably calculating how much to increase their demand. Ms. Rowe, Mr. Dwyer suggested you might have sabotaged the vendor relationship to prove yourself right. How do you respond? I let the absurdity of the question hang in the air for a moment. I documented decisions I didn't make about contracts I was removed from overseeing. Unless Mr. Dwyer is suggesting I have mind control powers over both him and Velmar. I'm not sure how I could have sabotaged anything from my position of having no authority whatsoever. Someone from Velmar's team actually chuckled. Did you ever communicate with Velmar about the contract changes? Once. Their senior counsel called me after the new contract was signed. He asked if I'd lost my mind. I told him I'd lost my authority. He said, and I quote, "Your new boy wonder just gave us Christmas in July. Did you report this conversation?" I documented it and sent it to Mr. Dwyer. His response? He said Velmar's lawyer was stuck in an adversarial mindset and would come around to the new paradigm. Patricia pulled out another exhibit. This is an email from you to Mr. Dwyer with the subject line, "Concerns regarding vendor vulnerability." Can you tell us about it? I sent this after 3 vendors mentioned at an industry conference that Byron Edge had become, quote, the easiest mark in Seattle. Mr. Dwyer's response, reply all. Success makes others jealous. Stay focused on building trust. The deposition continued for 3 more hours. Every exhibit was another nail in Matt's professional coffin. His own words, preserved in my archives, became the very penalties he'd refused to put in contracts. When we broke for lunch, Richard Torres pulled me aside. Why? He asked simply. Why did you document everything so meticulously? Because I've seen this before, not at this scale, but the pattern is always the same. Someone with more ego than experience decides they're going to revolutionize something that evolved over centuries for good reasons. They ignore warnings because warnings don't fit their narrative, and when it collapses, they look for someone to blame. So you made yourself unblameable. I made the truth undeniable. The afternoon session was brutal. Patricia had me read excerpts from Matt's book. Yes, he'd written a book during all this called Beyond Contracts: Building Business on Trust. Every chapter became evidence of his reckless disregard for fiduciary duty. Chapter 4, page 67. Patricia directed, "Please read the highlighted portion." I read, "At Byron Edge, we've proven that contracts are crutches for weak relationships. Our vendors don't need penalties to perform because they're partners in our success." Was this written before or after Velmar suspended deliveries? 3 weeks before. So while Mr. Dwyer was publicly declaring contracts unnecessary, Velmar was preparing to exploit that exact philosophy? Objection, our counsel tried. Speculation. Withdrawn. Let me rephrase. Ms. Rowe, did Velmar's lawsuit citation include this quote? Yes, it's Exhibit 1 in their claim. By 4 p.m., the truth had been so thoroughly documented that denying it would be like denying gravity. Ms. Rowe, one final question. If you could have stopped this, would you? Our counsel objected, but I answered anyway. I tried to stop it. I was removed from my position for trying. So I did the only thing I could do. I created a perfect record of exactly how and why it happened, so that when it inevitably collapsed, the accountability would be clear and the lessons impossible to ignore. Patricia nodded slowly. No further questions. As we left the courthouse, Matt was waiting by my car. He looked hollow, like someone had scooped out his insides and left only the expensive suit. They're going to settle, he said. $15 million. My malpractice insurance caps at 5. I'm finished. I said nothing. You could have fought harder. You could have gone to David directly. With what authority? You made sure I had none. You knew this would happen. Yes. And you just watched? I documented, there's a difference. He stared at me for a long moment. You're ice cold. No, I corrected. I'm precisely warm enough to do my job without letting ego melt my judgment. You should try it sometime. I paused. Except, you won't get the chance. The next morning, Matt's resignation was on David's desk before the coffee was brewed. No farewell email, no explanation. He just vanished, leaving behind only his red Mont Blanc pen on his empty desk like a bloodstain. The settlement negotiations were held in a downtown Seattle high-rise with windows overlooking Elliott Bay. The kind of view that was supposed to make you feel powerful. Instead, it felt like standing on a cliff edge. $15 million. That was Velmar's final number. David Park sat at the head of our side of the table, flanked by Richard Torres and two other senior partners from his firm. I sat at the far end, technically just a witness. But everyone knew I was the keeper of the evidence that had brought us here. Velmar's team was smaller than I'd expected. Patricia Chen Williams, their CEO Marcus Velmar himself, and one other lawyer. They didn't need an army. They had our own words as weapons. Let's be clear, Patricia began, sliding a document across the table. This is generous. A jury would award twice this. She wasn't wrong. The document was a masterpiece of legal brutality, citing every single one of Matt's innovations as evidence of gross negligence. They'd even found a law review article he'd written in school arguing that contracts were fundamental to business relationships. The hypocrisy was devastating. We need time to review. Richard started. You have until 5 p.m. Marcus Velmar interrupted. First time I'd heard him speak. His voice was soft, almost kind. After that, we go to trial. And Ms. Rose's testimony becomes public record. Everyone turned to look at me. Every email, every recording, every document showing how your chief legal officer dismantled your own protections while calling it innovation. Patricia added, the media will have a field day. David's jaw tightened. This is extortion. No, Patricia corrected. Extortion is illegal. This is leverage, the kind you used to have when contracts meant something. During the break, David pulled me aside. How bad is it, really? The truth? Please. If this goes to trial, it won't just be about the money. Every client we have will see how we handled vendor contracts. Every competitor will use it against us. Matt's book alone will become required reading in law schools as an example of what not to do. And my testimony will destroy us. We'll reveal exactly how we destroyed ourselves. He aged 10 years in that moment. You documented everything. Everything. Why didn't you come to me directly? I pulled out my phone, scrolled to an email dated 4 months ago. I did. 3 times. You responded that you had full confidence in Matt's revolutionary approach and that I should, quote, embrace the innovation or consider whether Byron Edge was still the right fit for my traditional mindset. He closed his eyes. I said that? You did. It's documented. At 3 p.m., we reconvened. Richard had done the math. Trial would cost us $3 million in legal fees alone, plus the PR nightmare, plus the likely judgment of $25 million or more. We'll pay the 15, David said, his voice dead. Excellent. Patricia smiled. There's one more thing. Of course there was. We want a written acknowledgement that the removal of contract protections was solely Byron Edge's decision, that Velmar operated entirely within the bounds of the executed agreement, and that this settlement represents Byron Edge's recognition of its own failures, not any wrongdoing by Velmar. That's humiliating, Richard protested. That's accountability, Patricia countered. Something your client removed from contracts but can't escape in reality. David signed it all, every admission, every acknowledgement, every brutal word of truth. As Velmar's team packed up, Marcus stopped beside my chair. We would have honored the original contract, he said quietly. The one you wrote. It was fair, professional. But when someone hands you a winning lottery ticket, he shrugged. Fiduciary duty to our shareholders demanded we take advantage. I know. You're the only competent person in this room. If you ever want a job with someone who values contracts, call me. He left his card. I didn't touch it. But I remembered the number. That evening, after the papers were signed and the disaster officially quantified at $15 million plus humiliation, David called an emergency board meeting. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it later from his assistant. Matt's entire leadership team was restructured. The meditation rooms were converted back to offices. The trust wall was replaced with our mission statement. The books about conscious capitalism disappeared from the lobby, and I got a call. Elena. David's voice was tired but clear. The board has some questions. I walked into a room full of people who looked like they'd just watched their house burn down. Ms. Rowe, the board chair began. We've reviewed your documentation. Your extensive documentation. Why didn't you do more to stop this? I'd prepared for this question since the day I started my archive. I reported concerns through proper channels. I was told to embrace innovation. I documented all decisions and stored all records according to company policy. I maintained relationships with vendors to monitor developing situations. I created predictive reports identifying likely outcomes. I made myself available as a resource while respecting the chain of command after my removal from the review committee. You could have been more forceful. Force requires authority. I had none. What I had was foresight and filing cabinets. The board chair leaned forward. You knew this would fail. I knew removing contractual protections in complex vendor relationships increased risk exponentially. Whether that would manifest as failure was a matter of when, not if. And you just waited. I prepared. There's a difference. I couldn't prevent the fire, but I could make sure we knew exactly who played with matches. A week later, I received two things. First, a promotion to Chief Legal Officer with a mandate to rebuild our entire contract framework. Second, a handwritten note from David. Next time someone tries to revolutionize something that doesn't need revolutionizing, you have full authority to stop them. Document that too. I framed the note, not out of pride, but as evidence. Always evidence. 6 months after the settlement, Byron Edge had recovered. Not fully, $15 million leaves a scar, but we were functional. Profitable, even. Our contracts were now so airtight they could survive in space. I'd rebuilt everything Matt had destroyed, but better. Each protection wasn't just legal coverage, it was a monument to the price of ignoring expertise. Our new contracts averaged 48 pages. Some called it overkill. I called it $15 million worth of education. The industry watched our transformation with fascination. I spoke at 3 conferences, each time to packed rooms of legal professionals who wanted to hear about the spectacular implosion of trust-based contracting. I never mentioned Matt by name. I didn't need to. Everyone knew. One Tuesday morning, I received an unexpected LinkedIn message. It was from Matt. Elena, I'm teaching now. Business ethics at a community college in Portland. They hired me because I'm the perfect cautionary tale. Every semester, I teach a unit on the Byron Edge disaster. I use your documentation as the textbook. It's the most thorough autopsy of corporate hubris I've ever seen. I wanted you to know that your archives didn't just protect the company, they became the curriculum for making sure this never happens again. Also, I'm sorry. Not for failing, but for dismissing your expertise. You were right about everything. Matt. I didn't respond, but I did screenshot it and filed it under Vindication Final. A month later, Marcus Velmar called. Not to offer me a job, but to propose something else. A joint presentation at the Global Supply Chain Summit about the importance of balanced contracts. You wrote the perfect contract, he said. I exploited the imperfect one. Together, we can teach people why both perspectives matter. We did the presentation, standing ovation. Someone actually asked for my autograph on their contract template, but the real ending came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. Jessica, one of Matt's former true believers, knocked on my door. She was holding a thick folder. Elena, I owe you an apology. I called you paranoid. Fear-based. Traditional. You were following leadership. That's natural. No, I was following charisma instead of competence. There's a difference. She set the folder on my desk. I've been studying your archive. How you documented everything. I want to learn. Will you teach me? I looked at her eager face, remembering my own hard-earned lessons in Dallas all those years ago. First rule, I said, gesturing for her to sit. Trust is beautiful. Contracts are bulletproof. Never confuse one for the other. She pulled out a notebook and started writing. Second rule, document everything, not because you're paranoid, but because memory is subjective and emails are evidence. Third rule, when someone tells you protection is pessimism, remember that airbags aren't installed because we expect to crash. They're installed because physics doesn't care about positive thinking. She nodded, writing furiously. And the final rule, I said, pulling up my current archive system on the screen. The person who says contracts don't matter is usually the person planning to violate them. That afternoon, I trained Jessica in the art of professional paranoia. She was a quick study. Within a month, she'd created her own documentation system, color-coded and cross-referenced. She called it the Elena Protocol. It caught on. Soon, the entire legal department was following the Elena Protocol, then other departments. By year's end, Byron Edge had the most comprehensive documentation practices in the industry. We never got sued again. Not because we were perfect, but because anyone who tried to exploit us found themselves facing a wall of documentation so thick, so precise, so unassailable that their lawyers usually advised them to settle or walk away. The red Mont Blanc pen Matt left behind, I kept it. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. I use it exclusively to sign contracts, real contracts, with penalties and protections and pages of beautiful, binding legalese. Every signature is a small rebellion against the cult of disruption. Every initial is a love letter to boring, traditional, utterly essential protection. They called me paranoid. They called me traditional. They called me fear-based. Now they call me Chief Legal Officer. And in my office, in a frame, next to David's note, hangs a simple piece of paper. It's the email where Matt removed me from the contract review committee for being misaligned with innovation. Below it, in my own handwriting, I've added, misalignment with innovation, $0 cost of innovation without protection, $15,000. Being right with receipts, priceless. Every morning, I look at it and smile. Not because I won. There are no winners when a company loses $15 million. But because I was there, I was prepared. And when the inevitable happened, the truth was undeniable. They thought I was a footnote. I was the whole damn clause, and I had it all in writing. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and the power of documentation. I hope Elena's journey reminded you that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous, especially when they keep good records. Where are you listening to this story from? Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of contracts, karma, and careful documentation, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed corporate ego leading to disaster? Or maybe you've been the one quietly documenting the chaos. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below.